Two conflicting sets of numbers in the new Marquette Law poll, both showing an extremely close race. Among registered voters, Governor Walker leads Mary Burke 47.5 to 44%. But among those who say they're likely to vote, Burke moves ahead, opening up her biggest lead on Walker so far, 48.6% to 46.5%.
And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. I'm Rick Unger, sitting in for the vacationing Steve Malzberg. And as I've said, if you are just joining us for the first time in this hour, don't adjust your television. Yes, you are seeing one of the House liberals in the anchor chair. It happens. This is an equal opportunity shop right here at Newsmax, and they're giving me a chance to do the job today, which I appreciate, and I hope you'll appreciate just as much as I am. So as you just saw, there is a tightly contested race taking place up in Wisconsin, where Governor Scott Walker is taking on Democratic rival Mary Burke. She is of the bicycle family up there, one of the largest employers in the area, Trek Bikes. And according to a recently released Marquette University Law School poll, the race is tight to say the least. Walker currently leads among registered voters by 47.5% to his opponent's 44.1%, but among likely voters, it's Burke who leads the race, 48.6 to 46.5. If you find that shocking, join the club, because this was not something I think anyone foresaw, and yet here we are. To take a deeper dive into this race, I'm joined by Dan Bice, political watchdog columnist for the Milwaukee Wisconsin Journal Sentinel, and in my experience, the go-to guy when it comes things to all to things that are Scott Walker. He is the man. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for inviting me.
So what's going on up there, Dan? This was not something we expected to see at this point in the race.
You know, I think no one in the national media expected it, but the only people who aren't surprised with those numbers are people in Wisconsin. During the recall election, which Walker won 53 to 46, there was a sizable group of voters who voted with Walker, not because they liked him or liked Act 10 or any of his positions on collective bargaining, but because they disliked the recall election. Right. And Walker's actually started referring to this and started saying that 3 to 4% of the population of the voters are not with me anymore. And this is going to be a tough fight. And, you know, the interesting thing is these numbers have not changed dramatically over the last 8 months. The Marquette poll, which is the best poll that we have, it was right on target back in 2012 and again in 2010. These numbers have been incredibly stable. In Wisconsin, we've got about 5 to 6% of the population who, believe it or not, haven't figured out what their position is on Scott Walker. And all of these millions of dollars are going to be spent over the next 2 months trying to convince this small group of voters whether they should vote for him or for Mary Burke.
You know, it's interesting. You've got it exactly right on what took place in the recall. As you know, I covered it quite a bit for Forbes. And it's no question that you're absolutely right that people who were not Scott Walker's supporters, may not have necessarily voted for him when he ran in his initial race, did support him in the recall because they thought that he was getting a raw deal, that he had been elected to do a job, and that he should have a chance to do it. However, the governor has had a particularly bad week, hasn't he? There's been nothing but scandal or apparent scandal, which we've seen. Tell us what's gone on this past week.
Well, there have been two major investigations that have gone on about Governor Walker. One regarding his time as the county executive, and then more recently his time during the recall elections, how they were raising money and so forth. For me, the most solid. And the first investigation, there's still a lot of records that are being slowly released, and there's going to be another batch of these. 50, 60,000 pages of documents that'll be coming out in the next month. And the second investigation has been held up because some of the people who were targeted went to court, and the courts have, again, been slowly releasing documents. And as a result, we found out in the past week that a mining company that wants to set up a mine in northern Wisconsin, and a firm that Walker's been very supportive of, had secretly given $700,000 to a nonprofit run by one of Walker's closest allies, a guy who actually runs Wisconsin Club for Growth and the Walker campaign.
And am I correct in pointing out that it wasn't all that long ago in the governor's career where he was an opponent of this kind of mining?
Well, he voted for a mining. Oh, yes, he said that he favors transparency. And in fact, he was making those comments at the same time that he was raising money for Wisconsin Club for Growth, which is the interesting added aspect of all this. It wasn't just that the mining company gave money to this group, but Walker in 2012 and 2011 was out soliciting donations for this group, and his staffers referred to it as his nonprofit, his 501c4.
Which raises some interesting questions right there, which I know are being looked at. Was the governor behaving correctly or within the context of the law when he was pushing potential donors over to Club for Growth, when we know that the law, both in Wisconsin and nationally, prohibits a candidate from working in concert with that kind of a PAC? What do we know about that?
Well, you know, the law is, election law is a little bit dicey on some of these things. It's generally okay for a candidate to raise money for a nonprofit. The issue becomes, can they spend money in concert with one another? And it appears that Wisconsin Club for Growth, in some instances, was asking candidates if they could see their ads so that they could adjust what they were doing. So, so those parts are the parts that the lawyers and the prosecutors are interested in. The aspects that are interesting to me is the fact that a mining company is giving money while legislation affecting them is before the legislature. There's nothing, as I said, illegal about that, but it does raise some interesting questions.
Well, today it seemed to maybe get a little bit worse. I know there was some flack this morning suggesting that maybe the improving economy of Wisconsin maybe isn't quite as good as the governor's been saying, and that a promised tax cut may not necessarily produce the cuts that many Wisconsin folks are thinking. What's that about?
Well, it is true. The books aren't as well balanced as they would like. There's a gap in the budget, and so that's created some problems. It's interesting. The debate is over the job growth in Wisconsin right now, and his opponent, Mary Burke, is emphasizing that we're the worst in the Midwest, and Walker's response is that we're third, which isn't the most compelling argument. That we're not number one, we're not even number two, but we're number three in job growth here. And another thing that's become even, that's complicated things further, is that there's a debate over whether a tribe can build an Indian casino in Kenosha, right on the Illinois border. And Governor Walker has not made a decision on this in nearly a year. And other tribes are now withholding money that they are supposed to give to the state. And this is adding pressure to the state budget and whether they'll be able to balance it. And of course, some of these tribes are doing this right now because it throws the budget out of whack in the weeks leading up to the general election.
I'm a little curious. The Marquette poll that gave us these numbers we spoke about earlier, was the poll conducted prior to or since the revelations of the past 7 days involving the 700,000, et cetera? Was that included in the poll sample?
It was in the middle of that. The poll was taken over the weekend. Those stories broke and started appearing on Saturday. So you're not going to get a clear answer on that. But you know, this isn't the first John Doe. John Doe is the type of investigation that it is. It's not the first John Doe revelations that's occurred this year. And again, we're talking mainly about this very small segment of the population that is undecided on this. And some of these people aren't really keyed in and locked in on everything going on politically. The John Doe revelations reinforce the beliefs of those on the left, and those on the right dismiss them as nothing but a witch hunt by...
Right. And to be fair, not without some reason, because I know that it's been said that the governor is not a target of the John Doe case. Is that the case?
It's clear that they've said he's not a target, but it certainly appears that his campaign is a target.
And some of his top aides have already actually gone to jail over this. Am I right?
Well, that was the first investigation, led to 6 criminal convictions, including some of his top county aides when he was the Milwaukee County executive. The second investigation just barely got off the ground. I broke the story back in October of last year that the investigation was going on, and in February, that some of the targets, some very wealthy people, millionaires, billionaires, went to court and have tied this thing up since then. A big date in this election will be September 9th, when the lawyers for the prosecutors and the lawyers for the groups being targeted, these conservative groups, go to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago and try to make the argument as to whether this is a legitimate investigation or not. If it's allowed to go forward, then who knows what's going to happen over the next 2 months.
So in the quest to be an equal opportunity offender, I should ask you about his opponent, who was a top executive with Trek Bicycles, which I think her father began. There's been some criticism that they send most of their work overseas, and that in practice she hasn't been creating a whole lot of jobs for people in Wisconsin.
Sure. It is true that Trek outsourced 99% of their bikes are made in China, Mexico, and overseas. And in fact, the polling by both parties, I was told, showed that her biggest weakness going into this election was the issue of outsourcing. And it was odd that the Walker campaign decided in July to start hitting this theme. It's my guess that they did it to try to influence a particular Marquette poll that was coming out then. The only thing is, it backfired on them because some Republicans said you shouldn't be criticizing firms and Wisconsin firms for outsourcing. One of those individuals who criticized Walker for that was one of our U.S. senators, Ron Johnson.
So, Dan, I got to tell you, this, as you know, is one of my favorite topics, and I could talk about it with you for hours, but I can't because I'm out of time. Thanks so much for joining. Dan Bice, a terrific writer with the Milwaukee Sentinel. You should read him every chance you get. Dan will do it again. Up next, we're going to feature an interview that Mr. Stephen Malzberg did himself. It was so good, we're going to show it again. This is with the co-founder and director of research for Michigan Open Carry, Inc. That would be Brian Jeffs, and you'll see that